I am stunned that we are not having any hearings in Judiciary Committee on the travesty that is happening across the country as asylum seekers are being denied their legal rights to have a credible fear hearing along the border when they come to the border. I, this last weekend, went to the federal prison where 206 individuals were transferred from the Texas border, primarily the Texas border, to a federal prison because all of our ICE facilities are full because of the mass detentions and deportations of people across this country that this administration and some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are allowing to happen. These individuals that I met with, 206 people who were transferred to a federal prison, I met with all the women who were part of that group, 174 women who were part of the group held in 3 separate pods. They were women who came from 16 countries, from Cuba, from El Salvador, from Guatemala, as far away as Eritrea. And Mr. Chairman, it was horrific what I heard. In spite of the fact that this was a federal prison, at least I will say it's a government-owned and operated facility with some accountability and some standards. These women said this was the first place they were treated like human beings. The majority of them had children, a large majority of them had children who had been forcibly removed from them at the border when they should have had a credible fear hearing for asylum, but instead they were prosecuted in mass courts with 75 to 100 people being prosecuted at one time. They were taken away from their children. Not a single one had had the opportunity to say goodbye to their children, to explain to them what was happening. In some cases, they were deceived, told they were going to be taken to take a photograph, came back and found that their children were no longer there and were in rooms right next door to their children where they could hear their children screaming for them. Mr. Chairman, the children were as young as 1 year old. 1 year old. And then these mothers were put into facilities that they call the icebox and dog pound. You know why they call them the icebox, Mr. Chairman? Because the temperatures are so frigid that it is freezing cold. They cross the Rio Grande, they turn themselves in wet, and they're put into an icebox and denied access to clean water for 5 days in some cases. A sink with dirty, chlorinated, filthy water. And on top of that, they were called filthy, disgusting. They were told that families don't exist in this country when they asked to be reunited with their children. They were told that they would never see their children again. And in fact, over 50% of these individuals had been held for longer than 2 weeks. Many of them, about 35 to 40%, had been held for more than a month, had not even seen their children, did not even know where their children were. What parent in this United States of America could say that this is the way we should treat people? I am outraged, Mr. Chairman, absolutely outraged at what we are doing. And I want to read to you, because this all comes from the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, some of the stories of the women we're talking about. One woman from El Salvador has 3 children, had 3 children. The first child was murdered by gangs. The second child was shot and paralyzed by gangs. The third child was the only child that was safe, and she tried to bring that child to safety. She has not seen her child for over a month. She doesn't know where that child is. She has not been given a credible fear hearing. Mr. Chairman, this last policy from the Attorney General that is taking away a lifeline for survivors of domestic and gang violence is outrageous. Here's the story of the woman that the Attorney General just weighed in on her case. For over 10 years, Aminta Cifuentes' husband beat, raped, and tormented her. He poured turpentine on her and tried to set her on fire. resulting in permanent hearing loss. He once hit her in the stomach so hard that she gave birth prematurely and punched her with such force that she still has difficulty breathing and speaking. She tried to get protection from Guatemalan law enforcement multiple times, but the police dismissed her complaints as marital problems and told her to go back home. When she tried to leave her husband, he hunted her down. She finally fled to the United States, where even there her husband's threats followed her. This is the case that the Attorney General has said the United States of America has no grounds to hear this case. What are we coming to? And why are my good colleagues on the other side? I know there are mothers and fathers on the other side who must be tormented by this. If you plan to not say anything, you have to go home to your children at night and tell them why you would allow this to happen to children in the United States of America. We should be having a hearing on this, and Mr. Chairman, I request respectfully—
The time of the gentlewoman has expired.
I request respectfully that we have a hearing in this committee where we bring the Attorney General before us to tell us what we are doing with these camps on the southern border and in these prisons with women who are seeking asylum and who we are violating
the time of the
in
gentlewoman
the international
has expired.
human rights law.